So we're going to get rid of these first.
Thanks, Q. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you. We know there's everyone here from students to environmental leaders, community members, and elected officials. So thank you all for joining us this evening. We appreciate having you. I'm your host. My name is Leigh Myers. I have been a news producer and host as a volunteer at KGNU for the last 8 years. Recently, I was brought on into staff as a digital content producer in the news department. And over the last year, I've had the pleasure of working with the Flows team, who's on stage this evening, to produce our year-long series, and we'll be talking about that. And Flows, meaning the Foundations for Leaders Organizing for Water and Sustainability group. Thank you all for being here, and we'll get right into those introductions. But a couple things we want to do, housekeeping things first. Quick shout out to the community organizations who are joining us this evening. You can find out about them at their tables in the lobby, of course, Flows, as well as KGNU, Eco Cycle, and Partners for a Clean Environment, or PACE. So thank you all for partnering and being here with us this evening. We also want to ensure that this is an inclusive event. So we have a message that we want to make sure is in Spanish as well.
Solamente para la gente que necesite o quiera practicar su español, hoy tenemos intérpretes, si quieren, están disponibles, solamente tienen que dirigirse a Rosana. Hay 2 intérpretes, entonces no tengan miedo, pueden practicar su español esta noche, ¿ok?
Thank you. And at this point, we'd like to remind everyone to silence their phones. So please and thank you on that one. And a little explanation on the index cards that you received. So over the course of the program, we're going to be asking questions of the panelists that will also be posed to you as well. So if you could write down on that card your answer to the questions at different points during the program, we will have you pass those cards to the end, and we'll be collecting those. We're also going to be having that Q&A session at the end, and so we'll ask you to write your questions on those cards. We will be passing the mic around at the end as well, so if you don't have time to write your question on the card and something comes up, we will offer that then. But if you have a question in advance, go ahead and write that down, pass it to the end, and we'll make sure to get your questions answered with all the time we have available. So with that, we want to go ahead and talk about what we're going to be discussing here this evening. The Flows series was made possible by a grant from the Boulder County Zero Waste Funding Program with support from the Boulder Arts Commission and Elevation Foundation. And it has taken us to workshops. We have shared stories of sustainability leaders. It's featured live discussions on KGNU. And throughout, we've talking about some of the threats to climate, but also the vital connection between environmental and social justice. So that's a little bit about what we're going to be talking about this evening. You can find the entire Flows radio series at news.kgnu.org, so make sure to check out that website for any of the things that we might reference here, as well as just more stories of individual Flows members that aren't on the stage this evening. But before we proceed and give full introductions to everybody's here, we want to turn things over to our Flows team for a moment to honor First Nations.
So before we get started, we would just like to acknowledge that we're all standing here together today in what is the territories of the First Nations of the Arapaho, the Ute, and the Cheyenne. So we just want to acknowledge that we're standing together here, and also we would like to bring in our ancestors as we start this dialogue today, okay?
Thank you. So before this evening, we're going to hear about Flows and the diverse work that they do to illuminate that connection between social and environmental justice. We'll also hear about the vital leadership role that low-income people of color and people of color and people with international backgrounds can and do play in the sustainability and environmental movement. And we'll hear the stories of other climate justice leaders, some of which who are here and some of which who are not. And so we'll be certainly hearing sustainability tips as well throughout, so we'll make sure to send you home with some of those. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and set the stage of our conversation by talking a little bit about who we have here on stage. First, I'm going to start with you at the end there. This is Michelle Gabrieloff-Parish. She's Flow's founder and assistant director for the Energy and Climate Justice at the University of Colorado Boulder's Environmental Center. Michelle is a former U.S. State Department Bold Food Fellow and former Center for Progressive Leadership Fellow. She's also a student and teacher of permaculture and ecological design, multi-ethnic writer and poet, wife and mother of 3. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. Next to Michelle, we have Andrew Q. Jones. He's a hardworking single father who joined Flows in the summer of 2018 as a Flows resident technician and works for EFAA in maintenance and at Boulder's Macy's as a fulfillment dock worker. He aspires to create a socially minded zero-waste business. Q, thanks for being here. And next we have Henry Torres. He is a Flows resident technician who immigrated to the U.S. from Venezuela in 1995 and joined Flows in 2016. Henry is a superintendent union iron worker, managing crews of 30 in the Denver area. Henry is a guitarist with the acclaimed band Mono Verde, holds a permaculture design certificate, and is a father of 2 teenage boys. Thank you for being here, Henry. And next we have Angela Maria Ortiz Roa, who was originally a Flows resident technician and is now a Flows coordinator. She is also a member of the Climate Justice Leaders Program, which we will talk about later in the show. She's a language service provider in Spanish, English, and American Sign Language. Angela has experience as an urban agriculture educator, receiving her permaculture certificate in 2014. In addition, Angela is a hardworking single mother and Colombian native that came to the U.S. in 2001 and a student at Metropolitan State University. Angela, thank you. And last but not least, we have Peterson Jean. Peterson is a Flows resident technician. He immigrated from Haiti just a few years ago and is a construction worker and entrepreneur. He is also a husband and a Front Range Community College student. While in Haiti, he worked on environmental issues with his sister, who founded an NGO there. Thanks for being here, Peterson. So we've talked a little bit about what Flows is, but we haven't given you that full picture. So to begin, we'll dig into what Flows does, but we'll start actually with the backstory. So Michelle, if you can tell us a little bit about the origin of Flows and just kind of explain where this group comes from.
Sure, thank you. So at the university, we had this amazing opportunity to make our stadium go not just net zero energy, but net zero water a few years ago. And with that funding, we were buying water certificates to offset the water use of the stadium. And luckily, my boss, Dave Newport, said, hey, what's the social equity piece of this? And him and his team that had been working with athletics had come up with a couple of ideas. And each time they ran the ideas by me, to be honest, I cringed. And I was like, no, there's no way we can do that. And I can't work here if we're going to do that. So amazingly, he did this thing where he kind of paused and he said, what if I just gave you this funding and you create whatever program you think would work to bring water and equity together? And I was like, yes, I've got it. So I just did a small pilot. This all started as a small pilot with a very small funding source that just said, what if we went and approached low-income communities in Boulder as asset holders, not to say, oh, we need to go and help these communities, but we need to build up the leadership capacity of these communities, and that it also serves our students to work with these communities. So we had diverse groups of students work with low-income community residents and start training up on climate justice, and then going into affordable housing with Boulder Housing Partners, who's in the house, and changing out light bulbs and shower heads and faucet aerators and talking to people about sustainability. But I think the most important piece was all of that was coming from you all are the leaders. You all have the smallest carbon footprints in Boulder. You all have experience at being frugal and reusing things and fixing things before you throw them away. So I think that was one of the main differences with the approach that we took. And then also we wanted to compensate everybody for their time. So we got some funding to pay students for their time, and then we also give community residents stipends for the time that they're out with us.
And so you talked a little bit about some of this, but Angela, if you could tell us a little bit about all that Flows does, the different types of things that Flows is engaged in doing on a regular basis.
Yes, I can do that. And so Flows provides free home visits in affordable housing units here in the city. So what we do is we enter the residents' home, and we usually enter in pairs. And what we do is talk about water and energy from the asset-based perspective, right? So we already going in celebrating the work that the residents are doing, and we find out that a lot of these residents are already really careful with the way that they spend resources. So instead of coming in to like preach and highlight the areas where we think that they could do better, we really just celebrate the areas that the practices they already have. And so as I said, we work in pairs. So one person we'll conduct the assessment. You know, we change the faucet aerators, we change shower heads, the light bulbs, and we install window film when it's needed, and little things like that. And the other person is sitting down with the resident, having a dialogue. We have created an assessment form that allows us to create dialogue with the residents around their practices and identify areas where the residents where we very gently and with humor and fun and care provide hints of areas that they could be, they could be more careful around their usage. But what we find out usually is that they're educating us. So that's really, really powerful. I feel like we really have an affordable low-income community that is very careful of how they use resources and is very ¿cómo se dice? Ayúdenme. Collective-minded, like just very thoughtful of their community, so they don't tend to just think about themselves, but think of others and how those resources are also available to others. So that's one of the things that Flows does, is those home visits. We've been really lucky to partner up with Boulder Housing Partners and able to visit their properties and to, establish trust and dialogue with those communities. Something that is really interesting is that we get to speak Spanish in different languages when needed. We have a very diverse group that is able to communicate in the language of the household, which I think is part of the success that we have. And another really interesting thing about Flows is that we're not only about highlighting the assets of the communities that we're encountering, but also empowering the technicians that are part of our team. So we provide trainings to build capacity within our team so that whenever we are ready to, we need to be ready now, to transition into cleaner and greener ways, that it is us who can lead the way in that transition. So we have offered several kinds of trainings. We have done this one's a little bit hard for my English, so bear with me. Rainwater barrel installations. Rain barrel water installation. Solar panel installations in some of the main offices at Boulder Housing Partners, which that was a fantastic experience. We have installed toilets, smart toilets. That was not so fun. And we have done, what else? We've done biochar. We've done a lot of fun stuff. We've done eco-social justice training so that we understand the power that lies within our communities and communities of color and immigrant communities. So that's just some of what we do. And we're about to transition, which is really fun, but I'll tell you more in a little bit.
And you can actually, as part of the KGNU Flows radio series, accompany Flows on one of the home visits that they go on. And I know that speaking with the Flows team, that seems to be a favorite. But at this point, I want to kind of turn things over to the rest of the panel on some of the moments that you've had, either in home visits or workshops, things that you've done that really stand out to you as really special moments that kind of embody the Flows mission and really drive home that kind of mutual learning moments and special moments that you've had doing. I know, Henry, we've talked about, I know the home visits are particularly special to you. Share with us what that kind of experience is like.
Well, I think the best time working for Flows is to get to meet more people, and people that usually you just don't meet because it's not in your surrounding, it's not in your comfort zone. So you go inside these people's house, and you actually get to see how they live and how, from house to house, some are very, very like minimalist, like they just have nothing, and some of them are super crowded, and that's just in the house side. But my best experience is talking to these people and get to know them. And that short time, sometimes when you connect with them, they will tell you, and I will tell them, our life story. Very quick, and it's very passionate. And I think that you're talking about this special guy that I met one time, and he built speakers. He was he never got out of his house, and he went only to the thrifters to get speaker boxes, and he refurnish them. So he was just doing it because he loved to do it. And in my head it was going, well, this guy is just repairing, fixing something that it was already thrown away, pretty much, that it wasn't working, and now he's making it into a beautiful art. He was an amazing artist. It will stick in my head forever. And he would just say, I will sell you the speakers at cost, so I can just go get more speakers and fix them. And that was like, it would just click to me. It was like, we're doing this work, but they're doing the work, and they don't even know they're doing it. And so it was very special to me. That visit was one of the best ones that I had. And I think I stayed in that house for like an hour. And they had to come and get me out of it. Yeah, because I was fascinated. It was just fascinating. It was amazing, and to see how he lived and how well he did his work and how passionate he was about it. And I like music, so I'm like all about the speakers, and, So it was good, and like that, there's others and just more and more stories. So getting to know people, it's my favorite part of flows, for sure. Yes.
And Q or Peterson, whether it be a home visit or a workshop or a place that you've toured, I know you've also toured sites and done that kind of work too. Is there something that stands out as a favorite moment for you, for either of you, on the flows experience? Maybe another home visit, Q. I know you've told me you enjoyed those home visits. Yeah.
Well, I might murk this, but I'm going to try. POSOL, a squiggly thing, E. Pasole.
Pasole.
Now, I don't know if you've had this yet, but there will come a day that you will walk into a home and someone will sit you down in front of a bowl of such deliciousness that it will change your life. So I went there to change their bulbs. They changed my life. So when you talk about what Henry's saying, this is just like you. You in here, you're a family to me now. We are a collective of minds and spirits going towards a common goal. And when someone invites you into their home and puts a bowl of food in front of you, and then when you try to get up, says, no, you're not full yet, sit back down, and then refills the bowl, you have a connection that kind of surpasses all the mundane things that we tend to think about daily. Oh, sorry. Wow. Okay. To make a long story short, we have to put this in the perspective of I feed you, you feed me, and I help you, you help him, that type of thing. And we have to get away from anything other than what saves the planet, what saves us, what puts us together and stops separating us. And if we can find a way to put what we're doing in front of the whole public and get everybody on board, then we got like kind of a Noah's Ark type of thing where we got all different types of people all pushing towards the same goal. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on more than focusing on our differences.
All right, Peterson, you're up. Favorite moment, something sticks out to you.
My favorite moment was the biochar training when Haila was driving the truck and I was hanging on the back, like basically take me back to my country on a little bit, like in 2 minutes. It's like I'm back to Haiti. Because growing up, I used to watch my family making biochar because I'm from a mountain area in Haiti. And then we don't have, like, some of us don't have money to buy, like, chemical things to grow food. So we have to make biochar to use the powder to grow food. So when Haila was driving, and then we have, like, machete, what do you call it? Yeah. Machete. So to, like, go get the road, and I was hanging on the back. And I was like, damn, I'm back to Haiti. Literally for 2 minutes. And when I come here, I was always like looking for something that can send me back home, like I feel like I'm home. And then I couldn't find one until the biochar training. So I was
And I can attest to the fact that having been there, that would have taken so much longer without your machete skills. We got
signed liability waivers.
What was that?
We signed liability waivers, just so everyone knows.
Right at Boulder Reservoir, too. So a little bit of Haiti right at Boulder Reservoir. Exactly.
I have an experience that I would like to share, too, that was really powerful. And it was, when we go into the home visits, we don't really need any of the information from the resident unless they want to give it. So there was this one time, I don't know if you remember, but you were with me, and we entered this person's home. And there were obviously some documentation anxiety, situation. And when I asked for the name, the person was like, do I really need to give it to you? And I said, no, you don't really need to worry about that. And so we conducted all our assessment, went through the whole form, laughed, talked about Boulder, talked about BHP, our experience as residents of BHP, and at the end, we usually ask the person if they want to stay in touch with flows, yes or no, and usually if they say yes, that means we have their information because that's the first thing we ask. And when I asked the woman, I said, do you want to stay connected and hear more about what we have going on? And she said yes, and I was like, oh, great. I forgot that she had not given me her information, and I was like, okay, great. And I closed my form, and then she turned around, she's like, but you don't have any of my information. And to me, the fact that she turned around from not wanting me to know who she was, where she came from, what she does, to trust me and give me that information, that was a very, very powerful moment. And that was, to me, a moment that I thought, as a group, we're winning. We're building trust. We're building bridges. And we are the voice of people that are voiceless at this moment. So that just was something that I think I haven't shared with you, Henley, but I wanted you guys to know that was something as a flows technician that really touched my heart. So that was powerful.
And Michelle, I want to ask you, again, if there's anything you want to add, by all means, but also if in that you can kind of speak a little bit more to the Flows mission and why we're taking the time to kind of share these sort of experience stories, because I think the storytelling bit, and we're going to get into the stories of the individuals here and why those stories matter, but why this storytelling method really speaks to that mission. So please, any story you'd like to tell, and if you could speak to that.
Thank you. Well, I think a lot of times when people learn about climate justice or really climate injustice or environmental injustice or environmental racism, the first things they think about are like, oh, poor you, and like, oh, poor your community, and very little like about the resilience and the wisdom and the knowledge that we have to offer. And I think that's partly different in our approach because we reflect the communities that we're visiting and we have those experiences. I think when we first started Flows, like 90% of us were bilingual and bicultural. And, I think even when we started this, people were like, is this going to work? Are you going to have people of color and low-income people who want to join a sustainability thing? And I think that's a decent question, because when you look at the environmental and sustainability movement in the country, I mean, all of the research shows that the higher you go up in environmental organizations, the wider and more male they become. So if you take all the largest environmental organizations in the country, the top 100 in terms of employees and in terms of funding, they are almost all run by white males. So I think it makes sense that people were like, are you sure people are going to want to join this thing? And I was like, yes, have you seen how we do things? We're so sustainable. So I think part of what we're doing is peer-to-peer. I'd say the most powerful story probably that I have with flows is that first weekend going into the community, again, when people were sort of doubting, are you sure that this is going to work? And running into Angela. And we're here to talk about sustainability. And I have to say, a lot of environmentalists' approach is we have to educate everybody, right? And we have to teach them about parts per million and how much carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere and how much methane equivalent to how much carbon. And, it's just really amazing to go into the community. And we just started talking to Angela, and we're like, hey, are you interested? And this is what we're up to. And she's like, oh, yeah, I have a permaculture certificate, and I run a community garden. It was like, right, we are here to learn from you all. And, Angela started as a community technician and is now a coordinator as a permanent staff at the University of Colorado Boulder. Yeah. Is now on panels, talking at conferences. We did get to go and speak in Carbondale. I think there's some other folks that are here that got to go with us on this trip to Carbondale, where they have some really progressive things going on in terms of the environment, but they hadn't really wrapped their head around how to incorporate equity at all. So I just think that the power here is in part being able to realize that looking at climate injustice doesn't just mean our communities are being harmed, but also that our voices are not being heard. And our voices not being heard is honestly part of what is causing the climate problems that we have.
And we're going to get to some more of those voices. I want to also bring up, Angela, if you can just talk about who's all involved with flows. We've kind of mentioned that, but if you could clarify that a bit.
Sure. So we are a partnership between the Environmental Center at CU Boulder and Boulder Housing Partners, and we have Tim Beal, who has been an amazing support for our team and our crazy ideas. Team, we love you. Thank you so much. So BHP, Environmental Center, and we have been really lucky to partner up with other organizations here in Boulder, like CRC, and we've done EcoCycle. We've partnered up with KGNU, and we have done, what else, Michelle? Am I missing? Eco products, and some of the fun partnerships that we had with those organizations is that we have exchanged knowledge, which is a really unique setup, because they have been able to either provide services or products or whatever, and then what we do is that we provide them with an eco-social justice training. So that's been pretty powerful to be able to bring a little bit of our focus and our desire to elevate the voices of our communities into those organizations so that they can also improve the way that they function as an organization, and then they can, in their mission, highlight those voices as well.
And Flows also takes part in policy work, which is something that Michelle, if you could tell us a little bit about that piece, how sustainability and the equity policy work and how Flows is involved there. Tell us about that.
Sure. It was also another experiment that sort of happened, that we were working with the city of Boulder actually on some energy purchase stuff with the university, and some of the staff said, would you mind looking at the climate action plan that we're about to publish? And I took a look at it and said, you're missing equity, you're missing community, you're not centering any of these voices. And amazingly, and to their credit, they said, oh my God, you're right. And we don't know how to do that, can you help? And so one of the first things that we did is actually they gave us funding to have Flows host a World Cafe. And we trained Flows technicians to run World Cafes, but also to really think about what your needs look like translated into policy. And there may be people in this room that are good at that, but most of us, this is not just like people in affordable housing, but I would just say most of us are not very good at saying, what do I need? What do I struggle with in my life? And what would that look like if there was a policy that assisted with that? Right? So, and it took practice. We had several meetings, and it would just be so hard. And it'd be like, okay, what are some of our needs? And people would sort of list them out. And we definitely had things like transportation, affordable housing, jobs, and really things that are all connected with a green economy. Okay, what would a policy look like? And we'd all be like, I don't know. And so we just kept working at it and then held a forum and a World Cafe where other affordable housing residents could come and talk about their needs. And then we translated all of that into policy, like potential policies. What would it look like if the city of Boulder was really interested in climate justice and helped us get, for example, eco passes for people in affordable housing?
Everybody.
What would it look like if, what was one of the other amazing ones that really, we talked to Tim Beal quite a bit. What would it look like if some of the resiliency hubs in the city of Boulder was affordable housing, and people's perception of affordable housing could shift from, I don't want that in my backyard, to like, oh my gosh, if there's an emergency, I hope there's some affordable housing near me because they're going to have food and shelter and medicine and energy. So we just went through a lot of that, and actually from that work came the Just Transition Collaborative with 3 other folks at the university that were interested in a just transition. And basically we're saying, if this area, as we hope that it does, transitions from this dirty economy that we have all been stuck in for a while to a clean economy, what if those of us that were most harmed by that dirty economy got to take the lead and benefit, and maybe even benefit with leadership in this new economy, right? And even the solar installation training that we did, we talked about solar, and we did solar installation, and we also said, what would it look like to train people to be entrepreneurs to run solar companies? Not just to get up on the roof and install the solar, which is a very important job. And then we even had, in some of those conversations, people saying, well, what if we weren't even training people to own their own business, but to have a community business, to have the communities own the energy? So a lot of these solutions are here. I think we're not that well practiced at translating them into policy. And I feel like I should also give another shout out to the city, because when they passed their climate action plan, they did say we're going to have a just transition be a part of this. And equity is now the center of the Climate Mobilization Action Plan. And the county is also going through work to say, what would it look like if we let communities drive these processes a little bit more and start to translate for themselves what their needs would look like as policy? I have no idea what the question was originally.
You're nailing it.
Okay. Policy.
You nailed it.
Policy. And so that's another part of capacity building. What would it look like if Boulder did this, if Denver did this, if all of our communities started to have all of us, and especially people who've been most harmed by these economies, learn to take leadership in policy? That could be a game changer in and of itself. So we're still working on that.
And this is another opportunity that if this is something that you want to see flows in action or hear flows in action, more like, we have an episode as part of the KGNU Flows series that we accompany you as you actually go to City Council and do a presentation there. So you can follow up a bit on that. So we're going to now dig into a little bit of why, not just for simple because it's the right thing to do, but why low-income communities, communities of color, immigrants, why these people, these communities make such wonderful leaders in the sustainability movement and are already leaders in the movement. So if before we get into talking about your individual stories and explaining that, I just want to hear a little bit about, and Angela, Michelle, whoever wants to say this before we go into that, just explain that a little bit more. what is it about low-income communities, communities of color, why are they leaders in the sustainability movement already, and why they should be listened to when it comes to policy making and it comes to decisions on climate action plans and these sort of things? What is the reasoning for that?
I'm going to say just a few things, and you can add to it if you want to. Anybody. I think Michelle already said it. Our communities of color and low-income communities have the lowest carbon footprint in the city. That's one of the reasons why we need to be acknowledged as leaders and be heard in our ideas on how to consume these resources, because we already are the ones that consume the least. So that's one of the reasons. I also feel that we are some of the most resilient communities out there. I feel like when we, as an immigrant, I feel like having to leave your culture, your family, your language, sometimes even your values behind, and then come here and adapt and grow and thrive and learn a new language in a new way and a new way to learn the traffic lights and things. That shows that we're very resilient and very capable of doing a lot of things. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And I feel like, unfortunately, we look at these communities like, oh, poor things, they don't know how to do it. And actually, we're doing it double. And we're doing it in different languages. And that's really powerful. And I feel like that shows the creativity, the capacity to thrive in hardship. And I feel like going into these home visits, I've met the most creative people in my life. It's really amazing and really refreshing to go into people's homes. And you see it all, like Henry said, some people are really minimalist and they have these beautiful homes, and then you have the cat lady. But then that cat lady has a lot to say, and she loves her cats, So I feel like there's just a lot of growth if you really open your hearts and your eyes, and you're really willing to hear what these communities have to say. I think there's just a lot of knowledge. As immigrants, we come with practices that sometimes are. We think that we have to let go when you transition and you're trying to assimilate and trying to feel like, you don't stand out too much. And actually, I think they're really powerful. And I think that it's worth for the community here to listen to some of those messages that come from other countries, because there's a lot of knowledge, and there's already a really strong connection to the earth. So it's really important to really open those spaces for people to speak their cultures and learn from that. So I don't know if I answered that, but that's what I would say.
This is a very nice audience, thank you. I will say, I think there's a couple ecological principles that we can look at that help us understand why some of these voices are important. One is the concept of the edge. And, socially, to be on the edge is usually not considered a good thing. And some of us up here have lived on the edge, and that's a very scary place to be. Ecologically, an edge is a place of biodiversity. If you look at the ways in which nature stores information, it's by increasing the edge. So if you think about our brains and how wrinkly they are, those wrinkles create more surface area. If you look at a river going through an ecosystem, not all rivers, but those meandering rivers that go like this, part of what they're doing is expanding the edge, expanding the surface area, which gives that whole ecosystem access to more water and to more resources. So there is really something valuable about the edge that you don't get in other places. And I think that part of the things that are causing climate change are monocultures, right? We have these agricultural lands where it is corn for 50 miles, right? And that's a monoculture. And the places where you find the edge in those places are probably the most ecologically strong, and they will be the most biodiverse. So I think we have something about the edge and bringing some of that information that you only find sort of in between or at the edge. And then the other ecological principle that has actually, I feel like, helped heal me in my life, is this idea of the Eco Tome. Have you all heard of this? No? Okay, I get to be the ecology teacher. And I actually learned this in college. I was in an ecology class, and the professor started talking about ecotomes and said, this is where 2 different ecological regions meet. And they're especially important because they're incredibly biodiverse, and you have all the flora and fauna, the plants and animals from one ecosystem, and all the plants and animals from the other ecosystem, and plants and animals that only exist in that ecotome area. And that for me personally, as someone who's multicultural, sort of changed my life and saying, wow, I don't have to like choose between cultures. I could think of myself as like having more traditions to pull from. So that is really important. But I think that bringing in our voices is actually expanding the ecotome. And we are desperately looking for climate solutions, are we not, right now? It's not going to happen from the center of a monoculture. It is. I'm not making a binary and like, it's not all good and all bad, but I'm just saying we can actually consciously cultivate some of those ecotomes. We can actually consciously cultivate some of those areas where we're like, something new is happening here. We have stuff from the main culture, and we have something from the fringe culture, and something else that is emerging, where hopefully solutions are going to be found. And if not, then at least beautiful community and some magic is found. So I would say that's some of why these voices are important. If I could get slightly political, I would even say that, there's a lot of different reasons for climate change. And I think probably everybody in this audience has been at conferences, at talks, at workshops, talking with your family about where is this coming from and what are the root causes. I think in Boulder we hear a lot about like disconnection or transportation or our land use, and all of those things are partly correct. In the worldview that I have, I've actually come to see that exploiting all of the people of the planet, colonization, disenfranchisement, I think are actually the root causes of climate change. And I think it's the earth saying, you actually can't continue this forever. So what is the root cause of climate change? It's social injustice. The solution part of that means that helping solve social injustices is actually a climate issue. So that's why we're here. That's what we're working on. And it's going to take work on all sides to make it possible.
Thanks, Michelle. So let's dig into some of the stories that we have here. Henry, I've already picked on you first, so Q, that means you're up. So I think working on this project, one of the things that it was very evident was hearing these stories of how an individual's background prepares them to have prepared the people that you're seeing here on stage and the rest of the Flows group to be sustainability leaders. Those specific stories really illuminated how that happens and why that is the way that it is. So Q, if you could do that for us, if you could tell us a little bit about sharing your story and how your life has prepared you to be a leader in the sustainability movement.
Well, first of all, this young lady walked up to me as a single father in a program called Family Self-Sufficiency Program here in Boulder. I have a 4-year-old, soon to be 5, named Jordan, and split custody with his mother. But when I came to Boulder, like overnight, my life imploded. Everything got shook up. Went from being engaged to being homeless. Got introduced to some really good people, EFA, who I now work for, and who also we practice sustainabilities with aerators and things of that nature in all of our units and our maintenance for them. So I'm actually, I'm actually doing that work on a daily basis. But again, everybody goes through traumas. Everybody has issues, and life happens. But what you do with the incident is really where you end up making the difference. And so when she walked up to me that day, I had nothing. And now I'm going to make it short. 4 years later, I work for a company that is doing exactly what this organization is doing for me as well, and gives us all the same power as a group to make the changes within our community. But as she said, we need that backing from you for our voices to be heard, because me alone, I could speak all day, but this microphone's not going to always be in my hand. And so when I'm out and about and I'm speaking to you and I'm saying hi and I'm telling you what my problem is, a lot of times I fall on deaf ears. What we need to do is now be open to what we're saying. Everybody has to understand that this is not just a me problem, this is a us problem. And if we don't address it, it's going to catch up to us, and it's going to catch up to us quicker than we can possibly imagine. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Peterson, your turn. Tell us about how growing up in Haiti prepared you to be as an environmental leader.
So, all started by women, because my sister was involved, and talking about biochar, people in my town used to cut a lot of trees, but never plant any. To a point, like, it's good for the, earth, but at the same time, you destroy it. And then one night, she just said, damn, we got to do something about that, and I have a plan. I told her, that's not going to work. So, and she talked to me, convinced me, and then we got other cousins, and we said, we're going to start a group, and then first start cleaning the city, like the street, like pick up trash, because people just buy things and just throw like a soda can on the street. We said, we're going to talk to people on the town every Saturday and Sunday. We're going to just sweep the street, pick up trash, and then find a way to get tree, and then go on the mountain, plant more trees. So, and that was going well. I said, you're right, so I'm going to keep growing it. So after that tree, she did the cash thing. It's a, ¿cómo se dice? I'm learning Spanish too at the same time. So we opened the organization, and we find some nun and priests that say, oh, we like your guys' work, so I'm gonna talk to it at church, and then more people tried finally join us, and it was successful. And after 2 years, and I decided to move in the U.S. And I said, I'm gonna quit everything. But at the same time, I still I was feeling so bad, because a poor country. We have a lot of people die because of lack of education, especially after the earthquake. So I said, I still need to do something. And I met Magnolia, that beautiful woman over there. And then she told me about flows. And then I said, maybe it's destiny to keep doing that work. And I joined flows. I met Michelle, Ayla, that made me feel like I'm home. When I say, I think I'm going to keep going. That's why I keep going doing flows.
Thank you.
Can I say something too? Because meeting Peterson was amazing, and for me, another reminder of how some of this work is translation and interpretation work. I had asked Peterson if he did any sustainability work, and he said no. And then later, he was like, oh, I just helped my sister plant trees, clean up the city, do biochar. Think about health and sanitation, so it was right. We're also partly using different words to describe some of the same things. So when people are like, no, I'm not involved in sustainability, that may or may not be true. We maybe have to use words like, do you care about pollution? Or do you care and act on health? So that's also, I think, part of the work of flows, and part of the work that I think we're starting to be committed to is how do we talk about this in a way that doesn't make people feel like, oh no, I don't know about that field of study. all I know is how to like build a sustainable home that reuses the rainwater 3 times before it dumps it out.
And that kind of reminds me, Henry, the story that you tell about your upbringing, also the frugality issue, that people seeing what they're doing as just being frugal and therefore not seeing it as a sustainable action. So I'm just doing it to save money, or because I don't have the money to do this or that, but that doesn't mean that you're not a sustainability leader. And I know that was part of your experience growing up as well. So if you could tell us about that.
And they were exactly on the point. We do it unconsciously. I mean, I grew up in a household where my grandma was from the Llanos in Venezuela, where they're pretty much sustainable. They grow their own food. They grow their own chickens. They kill the chicken. They do the big soup. And that practice, unconsciously, you're doing sustainable work, and you don't even notice. So I grew up on that. I grew up some on that aspect, and to me was unconsciously. To me, I never even knew that I could do all these things, and I was doing it since little. And I come over here, and let's talk about the water. Like I say, I used to in Venezuela. Sometimes the water goes off. For the whole country, there's no water for 3 days. So what do? We got, how do you call those things? Like water holes, like big tanks and cisterns. So I will have to go and carry 2 buckets of water, 19 floors up, because I live in an apartment, and that water was golden. It was like we shower a little bit, we used it to brush our teeth just a little. It was just, the resource was it was just gold. And here we just open the faucet and let the water run. And it just never shuts off. It will keep running and running and running, right? And we take it for granted. So I grew up seeing all that, and I come over here and I look and say, well, people don't know what they have until they lose it. And that to me, that was a very powerful statement. The same with the electricity. So I do take the resources very careful, and like she said, like my grandpa was always like, turn off the lights, turn off the lights, turn off the lights. If you're washing your hands, turn off the water, because it was always related to money, because as a low-income people, we don't have the luxury to let their water run, to wash our hands and shave or whatever we have to do. So it was always implanted in my head unconsciously. So now I just do it. I don't even think about it twice. And I teach it to my kids. And it's a struggle because they actually grow here where they see that the water never shuts off, right? But I know that if me repeating it and repeating it and repeating it like it was implanted to me, it will eventually come to them, and I hope they will take it to the next generation. And that's how I think that we become leaders, and it's an unconscious way, at least for me and where I come from.
I just want to say something. So one of the magic things about flows is that we have this really diverse group of people. Not only where we come from, not only the colors of our skin, not only the languages that we speak, but the way that we look at the issues. So we have this guy, Leomar Mendez. And oh my gosh, if we ever teach him about policy, he's going to make it so that there's a law that cuts off the water and the electricity. He really wants to have this experience here because he really based it on that experience that we grew up in Colombia and Venezuela and so many other countries having the services being shut off, that he's like, that's what it takes for people to start appreciating it here. So if we ever teach him about policy, you guys, you're going to have to, you're going to learn that too.
I was going to say, Angela, if you want to take it away, or Michelle, I know with your experiences too, you have some insight there as far as preparing yourselves for sustainable leadership. Nope. Michelle.
I do, but I kind of want to think too about the flip side of that and think about, okay, so having to be frugal is, is part of the sustainability equation and part of why our communities are doing it. But then also, like, what is wealth? Does that mean that wealth is just being able to show that you can waste stuff all the time? How do we define what success is? How do we define what wealth is? I think that's actually probably one of the most critical questions that we have to answer and imagine in this country. Because if we keep thinking of success as being that we can just dump stuff, or we can just leave stuff running, or we can have massive houses and not worry about where the energy and water comes from, we're going to keep having these problems. So just to sort of think of the flip side of that. And if you think about, like, beauty standards or, what is considered a beautiful home or beautiful community, think about the ways in which it actually does signify waste. I went to Uganda on that Bold Food Fellowship, and it was an exchange. So East African fellows came here, and then we went to East Africa, to Kenya and Uganda, but I just went to Uganda. And it was so insane to try to explain certain things, including, so in Kampala, the capital city of Uganda, 85% of the food is grown locally. You know what Colorado is at? It's 1 to 3%. And I've heard that counts carrots that are grown here, processed in California into baby carrots, and then brought back. I'm not sure. I haven't tested that part of the statistic. And so it was so hard in a way to, like, have them here and, like, show all of our beautiful green lawns that grow nothing. I mean, essentially. So, and then on top of that, we're actually slathering those things with pesticides and plastics, basically, that are, like, bad for us, bad for the water, bad for the animals. So, that's the other flip side of this, is what does it mean to be wealthy? And you know what? I think this is another place where, especially international communities, can help us rethink what wealthy looks like. Have any of you traveled and gone to another part of the world where you were shocked at first at having to shower from a bucket or something, and by the end of your time there, you were like, oh, this is doable? Hands up? Okay. So I think there's also something there, and it's not just about, like, being able to do without. It's about redefining what we need to be healthy, successful, wealthy.
Awesome. Angela, I don't want to rob you of your opportunity, though. If there's anything that you wanted to add of your experience that we haven't thought of. I know one of the things, was it you that was telling me about I know we promised you some tips, specific things that we're gonna get into that as far as sustainability practices, but we talked about carrying water, but the foot pedal at the sink to turn water on and off, I'm not sure if you were the one that was telling me about that, but just some of these, like, bits of tech, I guess, that are, if we want to call it that, just like that are commonplace in lots of parts of the world, that are. And I think also you were talking about installing a low-flow toilet in a community and being there to explain it to them, and they're like, yeah, why?
Yeah. No, I think the idea with the paddle, it was Lupe, who's another of our initial flows technicians, and she just didn't understand why. You know how when you're, like, washing the dishes and you have your soapy hands and you have to, like, turn off the water and, like, it's a lot. She was like, why don't we have just, like, a pedal that you can, like, press and control the amount of water? You just press it when you need the water. So sometimes the problem is, like, we have soapy hands and we don't want to turn it off, whatever. So it was one of her ideas that we were like, oh, that would make so much sense. That would be so much easier to use. But I think the one with it was Luis's house that you're talking about, installing that toilet. So maybe you can share that story too.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went and installed these water smart toilets that were donated by Kohler. I felt like it was dual flush, so if you go number 1, you press one button, and if you go number 2, you press another button. And so the whole thing is a little bit pointless if you don't know to push number 1 for number 1, because then you're just always using the number 2 amount of water. Yeah, so we tried to, like, gather the family, and we're like, it's really important, everybody comes, and we talk, and the parents and the children, and we started explaining it, and they really were like, yeah, we get it, the buttons. They were like, we can't believe how wasteful it is here, and we've been waiting for you guys or someone to come and make this go to the bathroom thing make more sense here. And they were like, and really, this is great, but ... Should we really still be peeing into clean water, even if it's less? So that's another great question. And then there was also sort of cistern rain barrel example where we were in Mapleton, and we did a rain barrel installation training, and there was a family there where the kids were really interested in helping and learning to use the tools and learning to install these rain barrels. And I asked the mom if she wanted a rain barrel, and she said, no, thank you. So we talked for a while, and finally she's like, why are your rain barrels so small? And I'm like, what do you mean? This is the legally allowed limit in the city of Boulder, and it's a huge success that we got this passed. You couldn't have anything before. And she was just like, let me show you what we use in Sudan. And she pulls out her phone, and she's looking for pictures of her home, and they have a rain barrel that is like 15 feet high and, as wide as this would be if we completed this circle. She's like, that's a rain barrel. I was like, what do you use it for? They were like, water, washing dishes, keeping the goats, which was their main form of sustenance. So, it was just this funny moment where we thought maybe she didn't want rain barrels because she didn't understand, the policy around water in Boulder. She didn't want the rain barrels because maybe she thought because she's low income, we were giving her the crappy little rain barrel. Right? So just funny, we've had some funny situations like that.
And again, I think it's these kind of stories that really drive home the specific examples. It was wonderful working on this project of hearing all of these types of bits of advice that it's so obvious that these communities were so ahead of the game in a lot of ways, and reversing kind of this thought process of who's teaching and who should be listening. So I know that there's some other leaders that you wanted to mention in the movement that don't necessarily get attention as environmental leaders, and I want to give time for you to be able to mention those, if you would, Angela and whoever had those, to just share some of those names for us, because I know while you're getting it, Michelle, you had told us, and this is part of the series, is that when you ask people about who the leaders in the environmental movement are, you often get names like Elon Musk, right? I mean, what were some of the other ones, Michelle?
Well, what are some of the other ones? Who are leaders that you normally think of? Al Gore, Hunter Levins, Wangari Maathai, Bill McKibben, AOC, that's a new one. David Holmgren, founder of permaculture. What was it? Greta has actually been rising through at the university when we asked people. Paul Hawken. Oh, I don't know who that is. Scott Martinez, who's here out of Boulder. Right. So a lot of times when we ask people, we've also gotten Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, all incredibly important people, not a super diverse group of people that we were just naming. And, when you look at, especially in other countries, or for Native communities here who is doing some of this environmental work, it's actually in a lot of these communities very dangerous to say, I'm working on these issues, right? And we studied, and maybe we'll give you some names of, like Nora Padilla in Colombia, who's working on some of this stuff and was having to fight around keeping recycling programs going in Colombia against death threats. So even when we think about who's the leader here, luckily, for the most part, we get to be like, hey, we really care about this. It's really important. We can make noise and we can do stuff. And in the rest of the world, the people who are trying to speak on the things that we're speaking on have guns to their heads, have a military or corporate mercenaries at their backs. So we did want to, and I think Angela has a list of names that we wanted to name, and even as you were walking in and probably as you walk out, we made a slideshow that included some pictures of flows, but also included some pictures of some of those heroes whose names we want to uphold and who we want you to know about and speak their names.
So I would just like to share with you, this is only 15 names of leaders that were assassinated in 2019. So I'm just going to share them and mention their country. These are people that are no longer with us. So maybe just take a minute to reflect on what this means, and for us leaders in these communities to really reflect on the privilege that we have to be able to do the work that we do. So we have Libardo Arciniega Saldúa from Colombia, Oscar Casoria from Mexico, Saturnino Ramirez Iteriano from Guatemala, Sergio Rojas from Costa Rica, Cristian Java Rios from Peru, Jose Alfredo Hernández from El Salvador, Otilia Martinez Cruz and her son Gregorio Chaparro from Mexico, Daniel Rojas from Colombia, Amiria Guayapi from Brazil, Cristina Bautista from Colombia, Mirna Sausos from Honduras, Paulina Cruz Ruz from Guatemala, Milgen Idan Soto Ávila from Honduras, Oneida Epiayu from Colombia, and Paulo Paulino Guadalajara from Brazil. These are just a few names from all the people that left the planet last year because of the work that they do fighting for our planet.
And I wanted to, if there was anything that you wanted to add about this kind of connection before we get into talking about some of the sustainability tips that we promised to share with you. Well, first of all, I want to remind the audience, on your card, we heard some names out there that were mentioned of environmental leaders. If hearing these kind of stories, if somebody comes to mind for you, whether that be somebody that is considered an environmental activist or a family member, that you just want to honor that person by writing down that name that's on the cards, that we'll be collecting those at the end. I know looking through those names and just kind of putting who they are would be great. We're also going to prompt you here in a moment that, and you can start thinking about this, if you have a sustainability tip that's kind of come to mind, something that maybe you do at home or that somebody that you know does, that you think would be meaningful for that information to get shared, we're going to ask you to write that as well. So be thinking about those two things. On the other side of the card, we'll have questions, and we'll be getting to those here in just a moment. But before we get into kind of that, we're going to do a rapid fire of sustainability tips. And before we get into all of that, if there's anything else, I think, Michelle, you spoke really eloquently about this connection between social and environmental justice and how those things are connected. But I wanted to give a moment where you could, anything else that you want to explain on that, if you could do so, so we have that.
Well, maybe in line with the list of names, another one is Ken Saro-Wiwa. Have you all heard of him? Yeah. An amazing Nigerian who was a playwright and an author, and I think he was like in soap operas or something for a little while. But he was also a nonviolent, peaceful activist. And he was probably, like, we actually, I think, I know that for us and all the programs that I work with, we actually owe him quite a great deal of debt, because he was really the first person to start articulating the fact that when Shell Oil basically started going to the Niger River Delta and ransacking it, he went to the UN and said, we need help. There's environmental atrocities happening there. And the UN is sort of like, oh, no, that's a human rights issue. And then he went to the human rights people, and they were like, oh, no, that's an environmental issue. Like, you're talking to the wrong people. So he was probably the first person internationally to start making these connections. And, what I have found, and really a really close colleague of mine that I used to work with at Woodbine Ecology Center, Robert Chenape, was also just in my life one of the first people that I had this really interesting conversation where he goes around, he's a native, he's Kiowan. He always jokes that we have like Kiowa County and like Kiowa Street in Denver, but there's no actual Kiowa people here. And, so he goes around the country and Canada and some other communities, training indigenous communities to fight oil pipelines or oil extraction activities on their land. And so we were talking about something, and I said something about him being an environmentalist, and he was like, I'm not an environmentalist. And I was like, you just got back from Canada training indigenous communities to fight fossil fuels. And he's like, yeah, but I'm not like doing that for the environment. I'm doing that to like preserve our culture. I'm doing that to save our lives. And so I think Ken Saro-Wiwa was sort of the first person who started realizing we have to translate some of that work. And they were so clearly fighting for their lives that it wasn't seen as an environmental issue, which is kind of crazy. And he was, I was talking about corporate mercenaries. He was killed by basically Shell Oil. They had a government de facto, which I actually learned that from a hip-hop song that we play sometimes in flows trainings with Talib Kweli. And basically, Shell Oil ran the Nigerian government, and there was more money there in oil in the Nigerian River Delta than all of the country's GDP. So you can imagine how easy it might be to bribe people and bribe officials, give weapons, give arms, give orders when you have a country or people and making like $1 a day and you're extracting tens of billions of dollars a day in fossil fuels. So I just really look him up. He's incredible, Ken Saro-Wiwa, and I think just that difficulty in talking about what we're working on. Is it environmental or is it social? In some places that doesn't make any sense. We're fighting for our land, we're fighting for our lives, we're fighting for our livelihoods, and I think that is something that we are so privileged here to not understand, right? And so that's also the double-edged sword of privilege. It looks good, but actually it does a lot of harm, including to the people who are supposed to be benefiting from the privilege. So I hope that answers
it seems like the heart of kind of what, yes, please, by all means. Looking at kind of like what else can we do as individuals and communities to combat the climate crisis, I think what we're hearing here tonight is that is a central piece, is ensuring that we kind of dissolve this difference between social and environmental justice and how those things are one and the same, in addition to recognizing the value that comes from listening to stories of communities of color, low-income communities, when we're thinking about creating policy and action in the climate, addressing the climate crisis and in the environmental movement. But is there anything else that anybody, before we get into kind of your rapid-fire tips here for your day-to-day living, wanted to add as far as resources or info to address that question of what else can we as individuals and as communities do to combat the climate crisis? I know you two in particular have all sorts of connections within the university. I know all of you here sitting up here have connections within your communities. So if anything comes to mind there of what, that you'd like to share to help address that question that we brought you here tonight to answer of what we can do as individuals and communities to address this issue.
Well, Michelle knows all the books. To me, it's more of a day-to-day interaction with people. To really is like, it's simple, or I think of it as a simple solution of like really just being, open to that person that doesn't look like you. Open the door and smile. Say thank you. It's like really, to me, comes to those moments, and then creating that sense of belonging. To me, in my personal experience from all the stuff that I've done and encountered and lived as an immigrant, as a single parent, and working with other mothers who are immigrants, I feel like you really is rooted down in feeling like you belong somewhere. Like if you are able to create community for the person next to you, and that person now feels like they belong, the moment that you belong and you feel like your home is yours, you take care of it. You love it, and you try to beautify it, and you want people to come over, and you want to care for them. So it's the same with our planet, it's the same with our community, it's the same with our streets, it's the same with our 5-second interactions that we have when we cross each other on the street or whatever. I feel like it really is about increasing that sense of belonging that we all have to the spaces that we populate. Unfortunately, I feel like some people, like Michelle said, people of color, immigrants, they don't want to belong to this sustainability movement. And it really is not that we don't want to belong, it's that we still haven't felt like we're welcome here, So I feel like the moment that we make those spaces friendlier and we're more, wholehearted in our desire to see beyond the difference, I feel like that allows for people to really start growing roots and then together caring for our home, So I didn't have any scientific answer to you guys, sorry. But I really think it's about kindness. It's really rooted on that, I feel like. And, something that was really interesting the other day, I work as an interpreter sometimes, and I was translating what I interpreted. And something that I noticed, and is the value of language, too. I feel like every single comment that I translated from English into Spanish it was about, what do you want to see in your community to make it better? It was a focus group. I have to keep confidentiality. So there was this whole question about, what do you want to see in your community to make your community better? All the people that commented in English, and I was translating into Spanish, everybody has I statements. I want to see this in my community. I want to do that. I want to see a library. I want to see that. Everything that I translated from Spanish into English, it was an us statements. We need this for our community. I want to see this for our people. And it was just that simple. It's just like the way that we use language to create a home for all of us. So good luck with that one.
While those are being collected, we're going to do a real quick rapid fire here for you of sustainability tips. So, Peterson, we're starting with you, my friend. What do you have for us?
One thing it's about transportation, buses. Like in Haiti, you never see a bus leave with 3 people. But here, I see it a lot. Like, you said you want to save the world, and then you drive with 3 people from Denver or Longmont to Boulder. That's not saving the world for me. I want that to change if I can.
And car sharing, I know you said too. So thank you for that one. Thanks, Peterson.
And to me, it's food waste. I am a food lover. I do not like to see it wasted. So, have friends over, save it for lunch next day. Don't waste it. The U.S., throws away 30 to 40% of their food production. So we can be feeding the world for real. So let's just be more conscious about how we use our food. And if there's any food outside, you guys, this is a way to not waste food, is to go and get it after we're done.
So I work in in the construction industry, and as a management, my company buys pallets of water bottles, and that's how we supply water to our workers, including myself. But I'm an advocate of using reusable water bottles, and I will take the time and to provide clean water and potable water for the workers. Saying that it's the best tip I can give is we have a choice, and we have a choice to do the right thing. And we have that little voice that tells us if it's plastic, what are we going to do with it? If it's consumption of light, are we going to turn them off? How long is it going to be on? If it's water, how long is it going to run? Are we wasting the water? So that's the best tip that I can give you, is we have a choice to make the right call at all times.
So one thing I'm going to say about what we do is we never just come and bug you without giving you a gift. When we leave you, we're going to leave you with a shower timer that you can stick up with a little suction cup on your shower. It's like the little, the hourglass, so the little bubbles come up, nice, it's cute, all that. And then to get out the water, you get out. Also, we give you a zip it, which I don't know if you are familiar with that, but for those of us that have long hair, tends to clog up your sinks and whatnot, but you have this zip it, right out of there. We got you.
I would actually say my tip is get together with somebody else. None of us can do this by ourselves. There is just no way. You can share your despair with each other, but also, start thinking about the policies that we need and start building community. And, sometimes you feel like you're freaked out to tell somebody when you don't feel good about something. And usually in the end, those are some of the more powerful moments that you have. So share your concerns with other people. Get together with somebody else. The power of one can be mighty, but really, just with the power of 2, you make it exponential. So I think the biggest thing you need to do for climate when you get home is talk to at least one other person about these things. Start joining up with your homies.
All right, thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. We've got lots of wonderful questions from you, so we're going to start into those in the last moments that we have here. Thank you all for your time and putting these together. First, I wanted to ask, we have a question here of how is affordable housing access an environmental justice issue?
Was that Tay? Who did that? I think I know who did that. Oh, great, it was Raimi. It absolutely is for multiple reasons. The easiest way to understand it is Boulder has actually looked at, and most big organizations do, different scopes of emissions is what it's called. And basically our largest source of scope 3 emissions is people commuting into Boulder. So I think we have something like 60,000 people that come into town every day to work here. And so you can think about the costs of that in terms of climate. Having people come from Longmont, I live in Superior, I have friends from Westminster, people living in Louisville, Denver, sometimes even farther. So if you think about it, lack of access to affordable housing here is driving up those emissions. So that's the most clear way to see that if we had affordable housing in a place like Boulder, then we could reduce the amount that people are having to commute here really significantly. It would change the game. My husband and I, Ramon, started also a nonprofit, I think in 2002. That isn't there anymore, but our vision was that affordable housing should also be sustainable, and that if you need affordable housing, you're probably someone who needs the most constant energy costs, not something that swings wildly every time that there's a storm, which I think a lot of us have experienced. Like, do you heat your house or do you wear a sweater? And anyway, so another connection is that, the benefits of sustainability in affordable housing are amplified compared to other types of housing having sustainability features. So I think that that's another thing. Passive solar is amazing. So a lot of this stuff does not have to be expensive. Solar panels are expensive. Passive systems are not. There's actually some research that shows that if we just aimed all of our crappy houses in Colorado south towards the sun, we could save 30% on energy costs. So that's another more tangential connection, I think.
Anything else anyone wants to add before we go? Next question. Thank you for that question. We have a question here that says, when you say your voices are not being heard, where are these voices speaking? How can we share knowledge and resources better?
I'll jump right on that one. Housing and things like electric, how would you describe that? When, for instance, I'm in a program where there should be a certain percentage of the bill included in my rent, but I still find myself paying above and beyond when my electric bill comes each month. There's no resource for me to go to have a medium in there to say, why is this happening, and how can we make that go away or adjust it so it's a little more fair. So we need to have entities that can intercede for those people that don't have a voice like me, because if I go to Boulder Housing Partners, for instance, not to throw them under the bus per se, but I go to them with my complaint, perhaps I get unheard from the across the desk interaction, and then I have no other recourse. That's all I have. We need something that's in place that you can say this is happening, address it, and have it be fixed in a timely manner where it does not displace people. And I see a lot of that happen, because when you say where your voice is heard, it doesn't matter, because it's so low that by the time the resource that is available may come, it's already affected you in a way that you can't recover from. And then we're back at that cliff that you've now been pushed over. So that's where we have to now come up with some means to alleviate that and keep that from ever even being something that a person faces, because now there's a whole nother level of instances and things that the person is now being subjected to, anxiety and things of that nature. So let's nip that in the bud and have something in place that keeps that from even happening to anybody. And that gives everybody a voice.
I also would like to add, it is hard. It is hard to create intercultural spaces when there's gaps in between the cultures, right? But I also feel like it's important then for you to support programs like FLOWS, because FLOWS is building bridges, right? So we're being able to speak the languages on both sides, right? So and to understand the culture on both sides. So we're cultural mediators, we're cultural brokers. So if you support groups like ours, and then you participate in events that we do, then you get exposed to some of that. And I feel like our voices, we usually have these dialogues amongst ourselves, the way that, you speak to your people, right? Like to your friends, your community, your family. So our voices are in those spaces. We just need to create spaces where we are able to hear each other. And it's both ways. It's not just like our voices and your voices, but like everybody's voice at the same time. So it's just supporting these groups that have the power and the ability and the human capacity to bridge those gaps between the cultures.
Well, I got something positive on that. I go to my office and it's blueprints after blueprints being shredded into the trash. And for many, many years, I tried to implement let's recycle, and let's recycle, and let's recycle. And they were just never really listened to me. And one day I get there, and there's a recycle bin. And I said, well, who did this? And they said, you. We've been listening to you complain the whole time. So there's your recycle bin. And I said, yes. So sometimes we do get hurt, yes.
And that actually, please go ahead. Just you have something else?
Yeah, I would say, So when you are trying to work on restoring ecologies, part of what you do is you don't say like, okay, this whole landscape is messed up and we're just going to fix it. In every single ecosystem and in every single social network, there is something that is working. So even if you're in just like cracked earth, you go to a place and you're like, oh, there is one plant here. That means that is the place where something is working. And what you do is you build up from there. So that's kind of what Angela is talking about, like supporting the places where that's already happening, right? Supporting those ecosystems, strengthening those ecosystems, allowing them to grow. It's a key, it's ecology, you can't argue with it. And then I would also say, this is sort of how second wave feminism actually got started. It's not just supporting like underrepresented voices, it's also practicing sharing what's going on for you in communities that reflect you. And there is no one is leaving this climate crisis unscathed. We may not be able to see it, I bet you everybody here knows somebody that has a cancer or has had a cancer, and you can't help but wonder if it's toxins in the environment that cause that. If you have friends that have had infertility issues, and you can't help but wonder, is this just what's happening to this individual person, or is this a climactic thing? Is this an environmental thing? So everybody's being impacted in some way. And I think that it's really important to go and have your community, whether it's 2 people or 20 people or 100 people, starting to talk about what is going on for you. I think that, that is how second wave feminism actually happened, is women starting to get together. And at first they were just complaining of like, oh, my husband does this. Oh, my husband does that too. My husband does that too. And they're like, wait a minute, this might be structural. This is not just like me being crazy. This is not just like me not speaking my needs. This is actually something that's going on in the structures that we live in. So everybody actually can do that, and we're all suffering in different ways. And I think different voices need to be heard within that, but that also includes you in your community, no matter who you are.
And I think in that you kind of answered some of the questions that I'm seeing here that was talking about like how some of you have talked about like how do you share some of this knowledge with people without like being preachy, and it seems like that's, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's kind of a combination of like being direct with people and persistent, like you were saying, Henry, but and kind of just asking these questions. So I know I saw a lot of questions in here about that, and it seems like that's kind of what we're hearing. It's a combination of things. I did want to ask one here that was, in places without composting, how can we bring social justice and inclusion to a service that requires a monthly charge? So I know that's something that I've heard you spoke about before.
Well, I mean, if you can do vermiculture, and you can have worms under your table, they will eat your scraps. And that's one. I mean, that's sustainable. That's what I got. That's a little idea, but it works. I have one.
I just, before we go any further, I just want to ask y'all a favor for me, just for me and this whole group. I'm pretty sure we're back. But when you see a guy like me standing at those 3 buckets and reading all the things about where he should put his fork, help him out. Just walk up to him and say, that's the one, and help him put it the right place, because I see a lot of people just go and they don't even read it, they don't even care, they just throw everything right into the one and keep it moving. But it's very important when you have those 3 there that we start teaching people that it's really easy to separate that fork and that compostable plate or that can and make a difference just by doing that for the environment.
And that also might be a policy question on top of that, is if some communities can't afford composting. I mean, this is kind of the side of government that I think some people hate, but, you leverage money from where it is to help for where it's not. And so how do you offset the cost so that communities that have the funding to pay for composting help fund communities that don't have that ability? I think that's important, especially important in places where the communities that have the ability to compost also have the ability to just do it in their yard. Like you could just be composting right there. Whereas for a lot of us, if we live in townhomes and apartment buildings and, duplexes and things like that, we may not actually, even if we had the ability, like we don't have a place to do that besides the worms under our kitchen counter. So it may also be a great policy question, and we actually just got a grant from the Health Equity Fund through the city of Boulder, and they leveraged the sugar tax, so they taxed sugar beverages in the city of Boulder, which are not healthy for anybody, and if it's not healthy, it's probably not good for the environment either, by the way, and then they're giving us some of the funds to go and do the next round of our work. I like that model. It seems to work pretty good for us right now.
And one of the things that I wanted to get to is a question that is also in here in a couple different ways. I need simple suggestions I can present to people to make changes in their behavior to reduce their impacts in a way everyone will respond to. And what is a good source? So I wanted to give some time here for you to kind of share sources or places that you could send people to kind of get more of these sorts of answers.
Well, we have EcoCycle in our community, which I think is a great resource. I had, when we were living in our FSS family self-sufficiency community, I was, I'm the crazy neighbor that is like, oh, they're recycling, they put the recycling in the trash and dive in and get it out. And I was it's hard, I feel like sometimes we deserve what we're getting, so I have days that I don't believe in human race so much, but today I do. And something that I did, and it was I was like, we're going to have a party because people like parties, and we're going to have a get together, and I'm going to bring EcoCycle. And EcoCycle provides a free training. So I was like, hey, neighbors, let's go have a potluck, music, yeah, woo. And then we had EcoCycle there with their boxes, and people were like, oh, a game, yay. And people thought suddenly, like, they were like learning how to recycle and compost through game. But he was creating that social space of interaction, and not me standing like a police in the front of the container being like, that, no, where it goes. Because I also understand that the parents are trying to teach their kids how to be responsible and take their trash out, and the little kid cannot reach the lid of the thing, so he cannot throw it in the right place. So I understand that. So I cannot be that angry at my neighbors because they're trying to teach their kids to be responsible and take the trash out. So it's a balance. But I really feel like creating those social spaces where you can like do it with humor, with fun, even though we're like in dire need of change. Like, so even if you get angry at some point, I think that's okay too. Like, but that would be my one way that I feel like I did it in my community, because I was fed up with people putting in the wrong way, and I did it through a party.
Which turned into a barbecue that lasted till 11 p.m. with me on the grill.
And any other resources? I also see questions in here about other organizations as well that should get shout-outs.
I think EcoCycle is a good resource. I think it's Resource Central now. The other thing with trying to get people on board is, I've also worked with Joanna Macy for a really long time, who really looks at deep ecology and some of the difficulties in being an activist around this stuff, and just really getting honest with when you're stuck in anger or grief or despair or feeling numb because you've just been at it a lot, and how to process some of that stuff so that you don't get stuck. And basically, you're kind of getting stuck because you're not working with it. And sometimes we think we're still like out there being positive, like, hey, everybody join us. But everyone can kind of feel that you're actually pissed. And they may not want to join that. You might be like, why is everyone in our group so pissed? And it's like, well, that's kind of that's the feeling that everybody's been getting from this. So I think that is one of the most difficult things in activism in general, regardless of what it is you're working on, because you have to like fight like hell, and you can't be like mean to people, and you can't be like pushing people. You have to be inviting them in. So that's a constant tension, and I don't know if there's an answer, but it's good to keep asking that question.
And some of the tips we had in here, just that I wanted to share, there's a lot in here. I want everybody to know that I will be handing this stuff over to the Flows team. I know the Flows team that you've mentioned, if people want to stay in touch or ask questions, that up at the front desk where the desk is, that's a place that we'll be able to kind of make sure that you can stay in touch and ask some of these questions that we won't be able to get to. But some of the tips that I was seeing in here, garden with Colorado native plants in your landscape. So we had that one there. We had some references to the shower also. So making sure that maybe not shower timer, but to lather, turning off the water there. I did see a question here real quickly. Well, I guess there's a lot of questions in here about fracking. So that is one of the things, if anybody wanted to say anything about how, when looking at things through a social justice lens and the position that Boulder is in right now with fracking. There are enough questions in this pile about that I feel like that it's only fair that we kind of pose that. So if anyone wants to speak about that issue.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Fracking is a very interesting one when looking at a social justice lens. Whether or not people know it, they seem to sort of recognize environmental racism and environmental disparities, where a lot of waste facilities being placed in communities of color, or sometimes low-income communities, or dump sites, mining, other types of extraction. And, I was talking about before how, no one's coming out of this unscathed. And I think that what is really interesting about fracking, and then I also, in my personal life, work on issues around Rocky Flats, which is a radioactive site just about 7 miles from here, and about 1,000 feet from my kids' school. What is interesting about fracking, and I think some of those other issues, is that we allowed injustice to go on so long around fossil fuels that now it's coming back to communities that haven't experienced this as much in the past, more affluent communities, whiter communities, places like this. And, I was really struck by the Occupy movement that really rallied around, like, we are the 99%. And actually, some of this stuff makes sense to me through that lens of, when they first started building homes at Rocky Flats, people would be like, how can that be contaminated? Some of those homes are $1 million. And I was like, right. But to the 1%, is $1 million home anything? I don't know that it is. And, so anyway, I think that, extraction happened first where it can. And, if you listen to people like Winona LaDuke, one of my heroes, or Shiro's, she talks about how basically the U.S. is acting like a major drug addict when it comes to fossil fuels. And like the harder it is to get some, the crazier we're willing to act to get more. And I think fracking is a great example of that. We're getting crazy. And before, we were only robbing our neighbors, and now we're robbing our moms for some more of the good stuff.
We did it, everybody. We got the fracking question in here. It's only fair. Well, we're coming to the end of our time here, and I want to first thank everybody here on the stage, the Flows team, for your participation in this series that we've been working on over a year. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you for your time tonight. So, everybody, thank you to the Flows team. Quick shout out to the community organizations who are also joining us again. Flows, again, has a table out front. KGNU, EcoCycle. We also have PACE, Partners for a Clean Environment. And we want to mention that PACE is actually hiring a bilingual business sustainability advisor. So you can find out more about that at the lobby. So if that is something that interests you, check with them. We also want to quickly mention that if this kind of conversation is something that interests you, we highly recommend you also check out our Trends podcast on KGNU. It's a collaboration between the Community Foundation of Boulder County and KGNU, and it dives into a lot of these issues that are affecting some of the marginalized communities here and some of the most important issues. And so that you can find that at news.kgnu.org. We have a new episode that just came out this month on the census and the importance of that. So you can check that out. KGNU is also beginning a year-long series on food waste. So stay tuned to KGNU to keep up with that series. So thank you again to Flows. I also want to thank Maeve Conran, our news director, who also worked on this series all year long. Thank you so much as well. I also want to thank Sarah Sarazi, who's here somewhere. She's our community development director for putting this event together. So, Sarah, thank you very much for that.
Hanali.
And thank you to all of you for your time here on a weekday evening into the evening. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Stay in touch with us. And
I just want to give a shout out to Remy, Magnolia, Tim, Andrea, and all of our Flows people who are Ramon, all of our Flows people that are in the audience today. We love you guys.
And our interpreters as well. Thank you to our interpreters for their work. And also, of course, to the dairy for having us. We are always so glad to be here. Thank you to the dairy for having us. So thank you, everyone, for your time. Safe travels this evening. Thanks for coming.
Blessings.
Thank you.